The first time I had symptoms of acid reflux, I was about 20, going on to 21, just fresh into boot camp. And at first, when I was diagnosed, they said it was just stress because it's a new lifestyle, which I was okay with and understood. And gradually, over months, and I've noticed that there was an increase of the acid reflux. And I would say about when I was 21, 22 years old, that's when the first hard symptoms started to come into effect. Not being able to breathe correctly, after getting done running for 3-4 miles, trying to eat to keep up with everybody else, and having to cut back because it just burned. It wasn't normal. So, and after that, it just gradually started to increase when I tried to adapt or to try to change. It felt like it kept battling me, saying, as if it was trying to be the better of me. Until recently, and now I won. I came to know Dr. Van Alsdale from a lot of pain in my chest, and never really got it diagnosed to what exactly it was. Being 8 years in the service, it was never really solved. They just gave me medicines and said, okay, you'll be fine the next day. Never did. So the VA, now that I'm out, provided me with a schedule to meet Dr. Van Alsdale in Spearfish Regional Hospital, and that's how we first met. The main thing is just the immense burning. I can't describe it. Some people say, oh, I've had heartburn before, but I really can't explain or compare what they feel, what I have, or had, I should say. Trying to sleep with what feels like fire coming out of your mouth, even to the point where eating a small piece of chocolate, it feels like there's a volcano trying to erupt. I mean, it's unimaginable. Okay, I first came to Dr. Van Alsdale when I was having immense pain in my chest. Wasn't really diagnosed while I was in the military for the past 8 years. So when I finally got out, the VA happened to refer me to Spearfish Regional Hospital, and that's when I first met him. The symptoms were immense burning, sometimes nausea, hard to breathe, and it's somewhat unexplainable because it was like fire trying to come out of your throat and a volcano erupting inside your chest. It's unimaginable. Chocolate was a really big one, and it got to the point where even some of the remedies that are suggested for like home relief were actually activating it. So just about anything. Some of the foods that did set it off were chocolate, self-remedy foods like bread that's supposed to help contain that, or milk. Actually reignited those symptoms. Some examples of how it ruined my life. You can't eat on a regular basis. You have a certain amount of time frame. You have to eat slowly, make sure that the food is digested properly, and then if you feel a flare-up starting to happen, slowly drink water to try to help eliminate the outburst, if you try to continue. And then for trying to sleep, making sure that you're upright, making sure that the food is digested properly. If not, just even trying to lay down to get comfortable, it'll all just decide to come back through, and that's the worst part of the night, because you never know when exactly it's going to happen. And if you're trying to relax, muscles relax and everything starts to relax, and that's the easiest time for it to flare up. I had multiple issues as far as it happening at night when I would sleep, to the point where it felt like I couldn't breathe. I panicked one time. I figured it was either sleep apnea or an episode, to the point where I tried to wake up my wife because I couldn't breathe. It feels like it's choking you on the inside.
So Leslie came to me from the VA. He was referred over from the VA for his reflux, and He actually did have terrible heartburn symptoms. As far as the workup that I did for him is the same as I do for most patients, where I do a Bravo study where I put a capsule inside of their esophagus and I measure the acid levels in their esophagus. Leslie's was actually one of the worst I've ever seen, to the point where his esophagus is acidic realistically most of the day. And then at nighttime it was pretty much all night long. His esophagus was below a pH of 4, which is what we would consider acidic for the esophagus. That Bravo capsule that measures acid in the esophagus allows us to kind of really objectify. Everybody experiences reflux a little differently. Everybody's innervated a little bit differently. It's one of the difficult things about reflux is that not everybody experiences heartburn in the same way. Some people do get it more in their throat. Some people get it lower down. Leslie is one of the unfortunate people who does experience true heartburn, where he feels the sensation of acid in his esophagus. Not everybody actually that has reflux gets that sensation. Oftentimes we see people that have really bad reflux, but they don't get that sensation, and they'll get dental erosions and other things. Leslie is one of the unfortunate people that had very severe reflux, but also gets that sensation of burning in his chest, which makes it very uncomfortable for him.
During my time in the military, the first sign that I knew that this was normal, when the medical facility and the personnel there couldn't figure out what was going on. They considered it to be an ulcer, and then normal active heartburn under stress, due to military. So I considered it just to be a normal thing. I lost faith, I would say, about 3 years of having the issues, that there was nothing that can be done. Either I complained about the issue, or I get on with it and complete the mission of the day, and that's what I had to do.
In Leslie's case, his reflux was so severe that, and he had had it for so long, that the medications no longer stopped his stomach from producing acid. The body adapts, and it will adapt to almost anything, and eventually those medications stop working. And in Leslie's case, the reflux, even though maybe it was less acidic on the medications, it was still causing the irritation and the burning of the esophagus. It was still irritating his throat and making it so that it was difficult for him to breathe at times. And so surgery really was the right option for him. Ultimately, this condition can lead to stricturing or narrowing of the esophagus, which can make it very difficult to eat, or even lead to precancerous or cancerous change of the esophagus. And so, yes, absolutely, in those instances. Esophageal adenocarcinoma is one of the most rare cancers in our country, fortunately, but it's actually the 6th leading cause of cancer-related death. So even though it's a very rare cancer, it's a very bad one to get. And so, yeah, it's one that we really have to look out for. As far as treatment options for Leslie's condition, there's lifestyle and dietary modifications, medical options, which are very common. About 1 in 5 to 1 in 10 Americans, depending on what study you read, actually take antacid medications. So very common. Unfortunately, though, there comes a point where people either want to get off of those antacid medications because they're experiencing some of the side effects of those, which include osteoporosis or renal failure, heart failure, MI, Alzheimer's, or they just, or the medications don't work for them anymore. They tend to be less effective with time, and so as time goes by, those medications stop working. And then we need to start talking about the surgical options or surgical treatment of reflux. When we start talking about the surgical treatment of reflux, we have a couple of different options. There is a procedure called the Nissen fundoplication, where we wrap the stomach around the base of the esophagus. That procedure has been around for a long time, and it's a good procedure, but it does have some disadvantages. And one of the big disadvantages of it is that it tends to fail with time. So about 50% of people after 5 to 10 years are back on their antacid medications. Leslie's a very young, healthy guy. If I did a procedure like that on him, he would experience reflux again in his lifetime, without a doubt. And so the Lynx device is a newer device. It's a magnetic bracelet that we put in. Leslie is really an ideal candidate for it because of his life expectancy, because he would outlast any other surgical option that we have. This device is meant to be a lifetime procedure so that he won't experience reflux again in his lifetime.
The other types of things that I did try was over-the-counter medicines, my wife's countless WebMD and Google remedies from home, to where she made like special brownies to try to help me out, or muffins, I should say. They worked for, I would say, the maximum of about 2 weeks. And then after that, it seems like my stomach evolved. I was like, no, this is not going to work anymore. So after that, then I had to go to the next step in medication, to the point where I couldn't get it over the counter anymore. And that's when, during my time in the military, they prescribed me with the next best thing. And I think when I visited Dr. Vanales, though, I was on the second most strongest medication for acid relief. And that's when my wife was like, no, you're done. So when I first went in, I was excited. The first confident person that said I can help, instead of just, well, we'll try this. I was illuminated. I was excited, ecstatic. In some cases, I was nervous because I didn't want to be turned down or not, not given the circle. So it really made my day. I determined that it was the right treatment, first off, because my wife said so. And more importantly, the utmost assurance that Dr. Vanales and the team at Spearfish Regional Hospital provided me that everything will be okay. Like this will work and it will change your life. And that was it.
The LINX procedure is performed laparoscopically, so we put the patient to sleep. We make some very small incisions and use long instruments and a long video camera with a little light on the end of it in order to find the esophagus. Many patients with reflux do have a hiatal hernia as well, and so that's the first step in the procedure, is actually fix the hiatal hernia. That's a key component in stopping reflux. Once the hiatal hernia is fixed, if it's there, I then place a string of magnets around the esophagus. I size the esophagus, and then I pick the appropriately sized string of magnets and I place them around the esophagus. And then that's it. That's kind of the beauty of the procedure, is it actually is able to preserve completely normal anatomy. The goal is to put everything back where it should be, and then just add this little magnetic bracelet around the bottom of the esophagus. The novel idea of these magnets is that the further apart they get, actually, the less attractive force they have. So the esophagus can still distend naturally. So when you're eating food, or if you do ever need to belch or vomit, those magnets can break apart, and the further apart they get, actually, the easier the esophagus distends. And so you're still able to eat a large bite of food or belch or vomit if you need to. But those magnets actually work the best when they're at the resting state, which is when reflux actually occurs. And so they work very, very well at preventing reflux. As Leslie said, day one after surgery, people wake up without reflux, and that'll continue. Right now, we're the only hospital system in western South Dakota or Wyoming or Montana that are doing this procedure. The next closest people would be Sioux Falls or Denver. Reflux is a very complicated disease, and unfortunately every patient experiences it differently. And so it's really hard to know, sometimes even if a patient has reflux before they come in, or what exactly is causing their symptoms. There's lots of complicated things in this part of the body, and lots of things can cause these similar symptoms of cough or regurgitation of food. And so there really is no typical reflux patient. When most people think of reflux, they think of a Tums commercial or a Maalox commercial, where they're going to take a couple of Tums and feel better a half hour later. Unfortunately, that's not the case for many people. And what we see is with Maalox or Tums, any of those medications, they don't stop the reflux. All they do is they change the acidity of the reflux. So stuff is still coming up. Digestive juices, digesting food are still refluxing and regurgitating back up, even though they're not acidic anymore. So the medications, for the most part, they don't stop the reflux. They just treat the symptoms. They don't stop the complications of reflux, which include the esophageal strictures and even precancerous changes of the esophagus. And so unfortunately, reflux is really a surgical issue. Now, not everybody needs the links, not everybody needs the same surgery, but that's why it's so important to have a thorough workup when we see somebody with reflux, because we need to figure out what's causing it and how best to treat it in order to know whether or not surgery is the right option, or perhaps there's another medication that can solve the reflux itself rather than just taking medications that sort of cover up the problem. So the LINX is a relatively new procedure. It's really only been FDA approved for about 6 years. And I've actually, the facility that I was at prior to this was one of in the initial pilot study, which helped the LINX device gain FDA approval. And so I was exposed to it very early on, and saw it as a excellent treatment option for reflux. Like I said, there are other procedures out there, but each one has sort of advantages and disadvantages. And the LINX in many patients where other procedures don't work is far superior. And so that's why I really became interested in it. So typically, I tell patients to take about a week off of work, but realistically, I don't want them lifting more than 15 pounds for 2 weeks and no more than 25 pounds for 3 weeks. A big part of that is just making sure that everything stays where it's supposed to and their hiatal hernia doesn't come back. We give it a chance to scar in and kind of let everything settle down a little bit before they start doing too much activity. But most people are able to return to work if they have a fairly sedentary job after about a week.
When I woke up, I felt like I was still at work, so I asked my nurse what her social security number and telephone number was to pull up her account. But other than that, I felt normal. Of course, the incisions, were the only things that were, I don't want to say painful, but were known that they were there. But the first thing I wanted to do was test out to see if when I woke up from surgery, it was just like waking up from a regular sleep. I didn't feel any different at first, noticed the incisions, but when the nurse explained that, you have to eat, that is when I was like, okay, here we go. And so I had my first scoop of chocolate jello. I was like, all right, here we go, and nothing. And it was very emotional at that time because I haven't been able to eat normally for about 8 years. And so that first bite, I was almost in tears, and I wouldn't change it for a world. Before taking that first bite of the chocolate jello, I was nervous, I was scared, but yet excited. I wanted to take the first bite, but then not at the same time. But as soon as I put it in my mouth and swallowed, there was no pain, no discomfort. I waited a couple minutes as normal to make sure that there was no flare-up, and I had nothing. The only thing that I did feel was the release of the magnet separating to allow me to swallow. But other than that, I was normal. The reason why I was so emotional is the first time that I had chocolate was when my 2-year daughter, they were making chocolate chip cookies, and they had the little chocolate chip bites, and she wanted to give one to me, and she was so happy. And as I ate it, it immediately tore me apart. I was burning, I was coughing, couldn't breathe, and she was scared, like it was her fault. And so I had to reassure her that I was okay. Now that she's 6, she doesn't give me anything before the surgery, and she kind of knows why. But now after the surgery and the great work Dr. Vanalso did and his team at Spearfish Regional Hospital, she can give me whatever she wants and not be afraid. I'm feeling great. Thank you. I don't have any issues at this time. I don't see any issues happening in the future. The only issue I have had is when I was swimming with the expanding of my diaphragm that was stitched up. I wasn't aware about at the time. But that's about it. Other than that, everything's been great. He's like my superhero. He's more than grateful, and I can't express my gratitude. Dr. Vanessa and his team at Spearfish Regional Hospital, at the moment when they opened the doors and said, we can help, that was like the first warm welcome that I had, for, my condition. After that, the reassurance that everything will be okay, the kindness, the reassurance and constant follow-up on their part gave me the utmost confidence that they know what they're doing and they can help. I felt more like a family member because they treated me as a patient when they needed information, but as far as the care goes, they cared for me as like a family. Anybody that would care would, genuinely, openly, and without any second guess. Traveling the world in the military did give me an outlook that there's not a lot of information or medical procedures or knowledge of what can or can't be done. I've traveled to South Korea, Germany, and Japan, and all those locations, they unsure. But when I met Dr. Vanasdal, and that was it. And that's all I needed. That's my last stop.
It really is probably one of the most rewarding things that I can do to tell somebody like Leslie that has been searching for a place to go for a solution, that has been having his quality of life affected every day by this disease, and I can tell him that I can help. But what's even more rewarding than that is after surgery, when I see him at that 3-week follow-up visit, and he can tell me how his life has changed and how he's able to do the things that he wants to do, and eat the foods that he wants to eat without having that same burning.
My life has changed for the complete better because I can eat spicy foods and large amounts of chocolate. My children love to share their candy, and that's another thing that I'm glad that I can eat now. One of the first things that my wife did was took me to Texas Roadhouse and provided me with a large steak as a reward for being healthy again, I guess you could say. And it went down smooth, and my wife was crying, of course, because I can eat it, and I was stuffing my face, and so it was a good time.
How'd that steak taste?
Delicious. The steak was amazing. I actually know what it is. I know what sleep is. Sleeping, I can, if the children allow me, it's nice to get a sound sleep without any interruptions from, being worried that, I can't breathe, or this is burning so much I have to stay awake, or, just sleep. The biggest fear that I've had, well, I think it was kind of over-exaggerated, because I kind of thought that the magnets would not come apart or get stuck somewhere else. I have a really wild imagination. But after calming myself down and realizing that everything will be okay, there was nothing to be afraid of. I think I got more worried when they sprayed a numbing agent down my throat. I kind of got a little frantic. I was like, okay, what's happening? I can't breathe. And they're like, no, you can. You just can't feel it. So I was like, okay. I'm trying to learn how to exercise my diaphragm to see if there's anything else I can do to help strengthen the scarring or anything like that, just for any future events, swimming or anything that I have to hold my breath. But as far as like the actual magnet itself, no, I cannot feel it. No, I haven't had any vomiting, but there was times where I would forget I had the surgery, and I would be either really hungry or in a rush, and I tried to swallow it as fast as I can, but the magnets don't allow that, so I had to, lack of a better term, regurgitate that. and it wasn't pleasant. It didn't hurt any, surprisingly. It just slid right out, and sorry to get in detail. First walking up to Spearfish Regional, I think it was at like 5 or 6 in the morning. The brightest smile I've ever saw at that time, besides my drill sergeants. They were very welcoming, provided me with, something to drink, something, lightly before the procedure, and I felt welcomed. When I finally got gowned up, they talked to me like I wasn't going in for surgery, but more of a coffee break. And so they asked me how I was, and how my day was so far, and any questions or concerns I had. And then the nurse asked me what about my family, and kind of made it relaxed setting, and it helped a lot. And then after the surgery, waking up, they kind of pressed the matter that I had to wake up, but I was tired. I didn't want to, but it was how they were assisting me to wake up, and how they provided me with food and reassurance that everything will be okay, because I was still under some of the side effects that was really noticeable. I commend it. I feel, lack of a better term, I'd be dead. The pain is not tolerable for forever. And depending on how much of the acid continued to rise up into my esophagus, I've read that it could have burnt a hole, or it could have caused cancer, or it could have done numerous things that I wasn't ready for, especially not with my family. They weren't ready for that either. So I had to make sure it was taken care of before it took care of me. Right now, the most thing I look forward to is traveling and eating anything that I want. If there is a delicacy, I will try it. If there is something exuberant and spicy, I will do it. And they can put as much chocolate as they want on it, I'll taste it. When I think of Spearfish Regional Hospital, I think of care, support, and comfort. Spearfish, let's find out what it is, take care of you, and make sure that it doesn't come back. It definitely was not a one-time deal. It was the most relaxed setting I can, especially into a hospital. If anybody else had my symptoms, I would definitely have them call Dr. Panazzo immediately, because he's the only one that I know that can handle and fix the situation. It can be done, depending on the requirements, of course, but it can be done. I would definitely say that he saved my life. If not, he definitely changed it. And I can't be more grateful for that. Having the procedure completed, I no longer have to exclude myself from family events. What if I'm just walking outside with my kids as they play or ride bikes? I'd only have a limited time before it starts to burn. Having dinners out in public, I wouldn't have to worry about portioning myself and just watch my family enjoy their meals while I just look at mine. We have family movie nights on Fridays, and staying up watching them eat popcorn and then enjoying the movie is great, but I can't do it while I'm rushing to the kitchen to try to relieve my pain, or trying to step outside to fresh air to breathe, and that doesn't help. The reason why I decided to is because this needs to be shared. It's life-changing, it's life-saving, and if it wasn't for Dr. Manazzo or even to the care at Spearfish Regional Hospital, I would have never had it done.